Welcome to another episode of The Platform. Great fun to have Andrew McKinnon on the show. He's known as Andy Mack. He's an icon of the Gold Coast, as you'll see.
There's not much in surfing the Gold Coaster Andrew McKinnon hasn't done. He's been a world champion longboarder, tasted national success as a grommet riding shortboards, and is now a busy surfing journalist. Even though he's been deeply involved in surfing for a long time, Andrew's lost none of his enthusiasm for getting out there.
I started surfing in 1962. 1967 was my first contest, so that means 30 years of competitive surfing, 35 years of learning how to surf. Still learning how to surf now. It's still a great challenge out there, just being able to get out there and catch a few waves.
And he's always had some ambition to work in the media.
I used to love writing surfing stories when I was at school, and I thought I'd love to be a surfing journalist.
He's a radio surf reporter.
Like weather, probably get the northeast sea breeze up this afternoon.
And fronts a local TV surf report.
After less than 1 metre of swell, check the beach breaks early. We'll catch you at the same time tomorrow night.
Andrew is a fine surfer who rides all styles of boards in all conditions. He's totally immersed his life in surfing and has a simple goal for his future.
To keep surviving on this planet and enjoy myself and keep surfing.
Nearly 3 decades on the air. It's an incredible story. We actually worked together for quite a while at CFM back in the day. It was awesome to just send him a message on Facebook and say, come on the show. And we filmed this. Stories, it's good to have you on the platform, man. How's things?
Yeah, really good. Thanks, Andrew. It's a real privilege to be on your show. I know that you talked a lot about doing something like this, so it's really good to see. And, I'm privileged to be on your show. We go back to the radio days at SCA, Southern Cross Oz Stereo, CFM and Gold FM.
Yep.
And, I remember asking you to fill in for me to do the surf reports on the weekend.
Yep.
So I could have a break and also get out on the town and really get on it. So 28 years, I managed to stay in that gig. In 2017, I decided to retire and try something else. And so I started at the local university at Gold Coast, campus Southern Cross University, doing a Bachelor of Arts in Social Science. And at the same time, I was in the committee with Surfboard Surf Museum at Currumbin, opposite Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary, and I've since become chair of that.
Wow.
I'm still doing the studying at Southern Cross University and also working on this Global Wave Conference in February 2020 that'll be hosted at Southern Cross University. It's a big international ocean conservation event. And, just when I thought I'd walked away from radio, they rang me up a couple of months ago and said, we need someone to do the weekend.
Hey folks, from the platform, it's Andy Mack here at Currumbin on Saturday. A really windy southeasterly wind, already exposed on the open beaches. Swell still around 1 to 2 metres, but really messy this morning. Southerly points are where the best waves are happening, particularly the southern end, from Kira through to the Super Bank, already breaking wide at Currumbin Alley and Burleigh Point, and you can forget the northern beaches unless you're in the Gold Coast Marathon. Now we're coming off a low tide of 5 a.m, high tide's at 11. Water temp's still quite warm for this time of the year, 22 degrees, but really for the experts only, and really the fit surfers. A lot of paddling will be done today on the points. This is Andy Mack from the platform.
Well, the show I do is all about stories, Macca, so let's go back to the early days in the Gold Coast. And When did you find the love for surfing?
What happened was that the old man retired. We were from Melbourne. I was born in Melbourne. And we moved to the Gold Coast in 1959, and he had the foresight to buy a block of land at Mermaid Beach, right on the beach, and that's where I learned how to surf. He built a 2-story house there, and my mum and I and Dad, we just watched surfing just develop. I mean, what an amazing time. The family next door were all surfing. They were all gung-ho. They were right into it, and, the boards were really big, between 9 and 10 foot. There was a big wave champion that used to turn up, Trevor Elms. He used to love riding the cyclone swells. It was just so exciting watching this whole thing happen. And then the old man said to me, don't worry, son, one day you'll be out there with them. And I'd just be watching these guys in cyclonic conditions thinking, how did they do it? And then my mum bought this board for me in around about 1962. It was a Joe Larkin board. And it was actually an epoxy board. We didn't realise it at the time. But she decided, oh, it needs a good paint job. So she bought this bucket of blue paint in a navy blue and painted it up. And so when I got to drag it down the beach, it was so heavy that I could barely get it to the water's edge. I was just devastated, wasn't I? And I said, oh, Mum, this thing's a tank. I can't surf this. And then it had a big hole in the nose. And so we went to try and fix it up, with foam and fiberglass. And they kept eating away. And we think, what's going wrong here, And then somebody said, oh, that's an epoxy board. So that was a lesson learned in ding fixing in the earlier days. But what happened from there is my next board was like a cut down, and it was only 8 foot long. I mean, this is still in the prime of the longboard era. And so an 8 foot board was considered pretty short. And I was only a little guy, so it suited me, really suited me down to the wires. And then from there, gradually the boards started to get a little bit lighter, a little bit shorter. But then by 1967, that's when the shortboard revolution hit, and Bob McTavish had come up with this fantastic plastic machine, it was called. It had a big diamond tail, big V bottom, and the boards were down to 8 feet. And that was 67, and then 68, they're going down shorter. By 69, we're on 7 foot boards. And this was really suiting me then. Like all the things that we dreamt about, what we could do, surfing, all the radical moves that we wanted to try and do. Suddenly, we're able to do way more maneuvers. We're able to tube ride better. Mickey Stafford, he was just a legend from Surfers Paradise. He was doing El Rolos, which is, flipping the board inside the wave,
Wow.
which was just so advanced for the time. And then by 1970, the boards were down to under 6 feet, and we just loved it. But the change of surfing from those 60s on the longboards to the shortboards of the early 70s, not a whole lot of people made the transition, and some people didn't like shortboards, or, for one reason or another, society changed so dramatically from the summer of love in 68 and the whole drug culture thing, the Vietnam thing, and the politics, and there was this worldwide change happening just as surfboards were changing as well. So that really compounded that whole cultural definition of society at the time, and especially with surfing. And we just lapped it all up. I mean, it was just amazing.
Hey, Macca, at that time back then, I mean, you look at the beaches now on the Gold Coast, they're famous around the world, and on a good day when there's good swell, it's just a nightmare. There's that many people out. What was it like for you surfing Mermaid Beach back in the day? Was there a lot of people out?
No, there wasn't. And when I first started surfing, the family next door, they were all into it. But then suddenly they disappeared. They were from Brisbane, and, they either got married, or, they went to Vietnam, or, or they left the country. And suddenly I was like the last man standing at Mermaid Beach. I kid you not. I remember one day just looking around, and just there's no one around surfing.
Man.
And it's perfectly offshore, and the beach breaks are cooking. I just love surfing out there when it was like that. So, living right on the beach, I was so fortunate. I did have a spell at boarding school where I met two great mates there, not in the waves, not on the beach. And, one of my mates, Bobby Knight, he only just passed away last Sunday. And I realised what a great effect he had on me, and how, because we were locked up in boarding school, all we could think about was getting out of the place, like that Animal song, we've got to get out of this place.
Yeah.
Just to sing that at the top of our voices. And it just made us even more passionate and more determined to go surfing. And, because we'd be locked up in boarding school, imagining, where we could be surfing. And so when we got the chance, we really relished it. And, I think that all really helped, because Bobby and I then got invited to join Windansea Surf Club with a few other junior mates. And that was a big thing for us at the time, because you had to be invited to join. You couldn't just join off the street. The club had an international reputation. That was really interesting. And then that sort of morphed into when I started competing against Michael Peterson, Peter Townend, and Rabbit Bartholomew. And they were all from Coolangatta, the Curly kids. And I was from the Northern Beaches. So, there was a completely different cultural scenario compared, between, say, Northern Beaches, where people were initially from Melbourne or the cities that had gone there to develop the place, and then at Coolangatta, it had that heritage of people from the Tweed Coast and the Tweed Valley, and of course the Indigenous and Mount Willamon, Mount Warning, Fingal. That area had been around for a long, long time. So they sort of had their own way of doing things. And Michael Peterson, he was really unique. From the first time I saw him, he was doing the old robot walk that the Coolangatta guys like doing. They had a hand in one pocket and the arm moving on the side. It was the Coolangatta shake, I called it. And when I first saw Michael Peterson, he had his board on his head and his arm was doing the robot shake. And I thought, oh, this guy looks deadly. And then next thing, I'm watching him surfing in the tube at Cura and Greenmount. He'd really taken tube riding to a whole new level. And, of course, PT and Rabbit followed him. And I became really friendly with those guys. And we're actually in the Australian team in 1972. We went to San Diego for the world titles. PT got third. I just missed out, just missed out by getting the final. But I got sixth overall, and I was pretty happy with that. But I was also thinking, can I really make a living out of surfing? Do I really want to be a professional surfer? These guys, they could see the vision. They were dead set on being, full-time professional surfers, but I just couldn't see the viability in it at the time. So I was going to Hawaiian College on Kauai, called the Kauai Community College, and I was doing political science, and it was a damn good excuse to live in Hawaii to go surfing. So plenty of great surfing in Honolulu Bay and all those spots on Kauai, and then I'd go to the North Shore of Oahu and, surf Sunset and Pipeline and all those places. But at the end of 72, see, we're all in the call-up then too, for Vietnam, and because we'd been in the Australian team, we'd all got special dispensation to go to San Diego. We got it sort of like a free card, but afterwards we could be back in the call-up. And of course, when Gough Whitlam came, Labor's first Prime Minister in 23 years, and he said the first thing he would do is revoke the call-up for Vietnam. We all cheered, and I was in Hawaii, and I thought, okay, it's time to come home. So I came home. Unfortunately, the old man had passed away, so Mum and I sold up at Mermaid, and we went south to Byron Bay.
Wow. From
living on the beach to living in the bush, and it was really a huge radical departure. And I think I lasted a couple of years on the farm with Mum. I really don't know how we survived. We had no money. We surfed a lot. I mean, I wasn't even on the dole, but I decided it was time to head further south and go all the way back down to Melbourne to see if I could exist in the city as a Melbourneian, and I realised that wouldn't work. So I went to Phillip Island, and I surfed with all the guys at Phillip Island, some great spots down there. I mean, really, really cold. I realised that's why we moved out of Melbourne to come to the Gold Coast, but the waves at Phillip Island were just amazing. And I used to surf with the kneeboarders, and including this Victorian State kneeboard champion. His name's Neil Luke, and Neil Luke came up with the nickname Andy Mac for me. And I thought, oh, that's really cool, And then later on in Sydney, my mum had moved to King's Cross, where she was operating a soup kitchen, and she was trying to save everybody in King's Cross. She was quite amazing, my mum. And she had this other offsider, Kevin Crosby, who was related to Crosby Shoes, and he'd seen better times as well. So they were sort of running the show at King's Cross. So Kevin was quite a character. And I remember him saying to me, in his Melbourne accent, oh, yes, son, yes, you could be like Johnny Tapp, not voice of the turf, voice of the surf. Call yourself Andy Mac, voice of the surf. I thought, that sounds pretty cool. So the next thing, Nat Young offered me to do the surf report on Double J before it became Triple J, before it became FM. I think Double J started around about 75, 76. And so in 78, Nat had come into the shop that I had at Avalon. By this stage, I was living on the northernmost of Avalon and running this shop called Don't Panic, It's Organic. And in actual fact, that was the saying that Neil Luke also had. He really had a turn of praise, Neil. So I coined that one as well. But I was panicking all the way, thinking, what the hell have I done? Trying to run a health food restaurant as a surfer, and, this is a full-time gig as a small businessman. And Nat walked into the shop and said, can you do the surf report for me? And I said, yeah, a piece of cake. I was living at Whale Beach, had a great view of the wedge from the southern end of Whale Beach at Mallow Road, looking straight into the wedge. So it was easy to do the surf report from bed. And that's where my surf report sort of era started, basically, back in 78.
But, mate, that must be amazing to look back to think that you did, nearly 3 decades on Gold Coast radio. I mean, it's a staple in people's lives to hear you on the radio telling them about the beach and surf. It must be crazy to think you did that for so long.
Yeah, well, I got up to 28 years and I was shooting for 30. I'd been the last man standing from the original team, with Dean Miller and Sammy Power and, all those, Suki Mead, all those incredibly talented people on radio. I learned so much from them. And, of course, they all went on to bigger and better careers. And I was still doing the surf reports. I had a couple of rocky roads there for a while, but, I maintained the position. And, you were able to help me there at one stage on the weekend, which was great. I helped Terry Tapatis.
Yeah.
Sort of with his career. A lot of people came and went, but I sort of hung in there, and then I thought, well, maybe it's time to step off. And so after a couple of months of being in retirement after 28 years, I was thinking, well, what am I going to do? And I thought, I'll go back to uni, because I'd had a couple of cracks at uni. I mean, I'd had a crack in Hawaii, and I'd had a crack also in Lismore. And so Lismore still had my student ID from 1980. So I enrolled at Gold Coast campus, Southern Cross University. I'm in my second year now, Bachelor of Arts in Social Science. I've also managed to convince the university to support this big event happening in February 2020 called Global Wave Conference. This event's been going, we're up to the 6th biennial. It happens every 2 years, hosted by Save the Waves Coalition and Surfrider Foundation, America and Europe, Surfers Against Sewage, and Wild Coast. 5 international partners there. And I went to Santa Cruz last March and I said, look, we need to do this on the Gold Coast. So it wasn't that hard to convince the guys and girls to come to the Gold Coast. So we're working on that. And the venue, of course, is Gold Coast campus, Southern Cross University. It'll be a 5-day event called Global Wave Conference 2020. And I mean, what a huge year this is going to be for surfing. For the first time, surfing's introduced into the Olympics in Japan. That happens later on in July, August. So we're going to have a lot of great speakers happening there. And the other thing I'm doing too, while this is all going on in my retirement, I told everyone I'd retired, I got involved in the local surf museum, Surf World Surf Museum at Currumbin, obviously Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary. And I sort of did the Steve Bradbury there, Andrew. I was just sort of in the background and we're all going for the line to see who was going to run the show. And they all fell over and I was the last one standing.
Mate, surfing is one of those sports where I think once it's in your soul, once you're out there enough, you live it for the rest of your life. It's just the greatest sport. I mean, you must get a thrill when you look back and see a clip on YouTube that your mate put on there with those great videos.
Yeah, I was really fortunate there. That was 1977 with Greg Hugland. And I went to South Africa. This was just before Nat offered me the surf report. And I was still sort of had 1 foot in the competition arena and 1 foot outside. It was sort of like that in the 70s. Someone was really super committed. Although, PT had become the first world professional champion in 76. There still wasn't really a full-time circuit. So 77 was really the start of it. And, Sean Thompson became the world champion that year. And then the following year in 78, Robert Bartholomew became the champion. But in 77, I thought, why not? I'll go over to South Africa and compete in the Gunston 500 that was held at Durban, the Bay of Plenty, they called it in those days. And really great beach break and really good right-hand break. I mean, this is where Geordie Smith has done a lot of his surfing. And Sean Thompson was the king of South Africa, of course. He won that event. I got to the quarterfinals, but then the big mission, of course, was to go to Joe Bay, go south and go down to Joe Bay. And, wow, it broke for 10 days in a row, anywhere from 6 feet to 8 to 10 feet. There was no let up. After 10 days of surfing J Bay, I could barely stand up. Even if I wanted to go surfing, I was cooked. But, I was very fortunate that Greg Hugland was making a movie at the time called Fantasies. And that vision that you've been able to get hold of, in fact, it never made the final cut in the movie because he had so much great footage of Hawaii and Indonesia and Australia, South Africa. I think I got one shot in the movie, but this is a whole lot of footage that's never really seen the light of day. So, you're doing us all a great favour by being able to show some of this. And
Well, mate, people look at the Gold Coast now as a surfing mecca in the world, and we've got Parker, and we've got, Mick, and it's never ending. So many great surfers, Munga before them.
yeah.
Back in your day, MP and Rabbit. I mean, what was it like? You've had a long friendship with Rabbit, but mate, his story on the Gold Coast must be epic.
Look, it really is. And, I haven't mentioned Gold Coast World Surfing Reserve. I mean, we got from Burleigh through to Snapper endorsed as a World Surfing Reserve in 2015 by Save the Waves, and then Council and the state government endorsed it in 2016. And, of course, we made Rabbit our patron. He's our number one patron, of course. He's a great ambassador. He's got an AM to his name, 1978 world champion. He's got so many credits to his name. He's an incredible communicator, great ambassador for the sport, and a great old-time friend. And, initially I'd been at boarding school at TSS with Bobby in the 60s, but I ended up at Miami High School towards the end of that. And Rabbit and I were in the same class together in year 11. And,
wow.
Michael Peterson turned up there briefly as well.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. I mean, PT went to Tweed High, so he never got to Miami. But through the contest, because we're all juniors in those days, we all got very friendly. And, we were part of that Australian team that went to San Diego in 1972. So, that bonded us even more. And, to watch... those guys, the original Curly kids, and then the new generation that came in the late 80s, early 90s, namely Joel Parks and Mick Fanning and Dean Morrison. That was incredible to watch that. And by this stage, I was doing commentary at a lot of the events, the Pro Juniors, some of the CT events. And I watched their whole development, including that of the great Kelly Slater. and Andy Irons. And so, you know, to watch that whole development come through while I'm doing surf reports, I'm commentating, I'm still there, and by this stage, you know, I started competing on longboards again. The longboards came back in the 80s, and I managed to win a world longboard title in Puerto Rico in 1988. And then in 1989, I saw that this new radio station was starting on the Gold Coast. So I put my hand up to do the surf report, because I had worked in Sydney as well with Mark Warren on Triple M Network, and some of the guys from the Triple M Network had come across to establish the Gold Coast radio station. So, you know, to come back to the Gold Coast after all that time, you know, like I was here up until 73, and then I disappeared, and then I came back in 1989 on the wave of radio and this whole new generation of surfing the Gold Coast. I mean, it's just so amazing to watch this whole thing go down, and Rabbit's still very much there, and PT had moved to America. You know, he's a great ambassador in America. Michael, of course, hit some hard times, you know, had mental issues, and but, you know, he was still okay at the end. You could talk to him, but, you know, it was very sad what had happened to him, and he passed away in 2012, and, you know, we were pretty sad to see him go. But I feel so fortunate that I've been able to go through, as you said, all these different generations over the years, and I'm still here today doing it. So, you know, you got to thank your lucky stars. Thank you very much upstairs. So, you know.
I was going to say, Macca, that there's like some sort of icons of the Gold Coast that kind of don't get the recognition they deserve, and I reckon you're one of them, because I mean, seriously, the surf industry on the Gold Coast is a massive thing. It's what we're famous for around the world, and you've been a part of that right from the start. It's quite incredible, and I love asking people on my show if they could live the ultimate dream, what it would be. But I mean, you've seemed like you've been living this incredible dream.
Yeah, and another old mate's just trying to ring me at the moment, JC. I'm just going to have to let that call go. But he's a guy that I've grown up with, and you probably know Johnny Charlton. And, you know, he presented the Coast Watch series with Ken Brown. And he's another guy that I grew up with on the Gold Coast, and he's up in Noosa, and he's still living the dream. We're all still sort of living the dream. I think that, you know, the love of surfing and, you know, being so inspired by all the great memories and things that have happened, you know, it just keeps you motivated. And there's really no such thing as retirement, I've realised. I made this big statement that I'd officially retired, but I sort of knew there's really no such thing as retirement. So we just keep on chipping on. And it's not about the accolades. It's not about awards or all of that for me. I just love being involved. I just love, you know, contributing where I can, and also, you know, the conservation side to me is really, really important. I mean, we're now living in a time, the Anthropocene generation we are, the humans that have made impact on the planet, and how we're going to try and reverse this. So I'm very dedicated towards that, to climate change and all the issues that we're facing. And it's one of the things with the Global Wave Conference where we hope to touch on, you know, coming up with solutions and outcomes for the future, because the future's a little bit dire. Even though, you know, living here on the Gold Coast, you wouldn't know it. But, you know, this last week, we've had some of the best surf ever. I mean, Snapper Rocks is as good as it gets, and Cura on the Monday. The 1st of July, I mean, it just rolled in like perfect waves, and there was Joel Parkinson and Mick Fanning still dominating the lineup better than everybody else. Although there's about 1,000 people out there to compete with, but those guys, you know, they're like the kings, and everybody makes way when they're out there surfing.
Yeah, well, mate, Mac, it's so good to have a chat with you, mate. Really appreciate it. Like I said, what you do on the coast is pretty awesome. We're still hearing on the radio. You're still in the newspaper. You're still shining the light on local talent. So great to have you on the show.
It's a great privilege. Thanks, Andrew, and always good to talk with you. So, yeah, keep on doing what you're doing too, mate.
Thanks, bud.
Spread the positive message. That's what we want.
Yes, there you go. Great to feature a great local story in Andy Mack. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time on the platform.